welcome to another episode of the Superbold podcast. I'm Fred Joyle, and as you know, I dig into people's lives and their histories and find out where they've been bold and where they stumbled along the way and hesitated and created fulfilling lives. And my guests today are some new friends of mine, but they have become dear friends of mine very quickly. And every once in a while, you meet people that you say, oh, these people are going to be in my life forever. And that's the way it was with Michael Anderson and Laura Maly, that who run Wonderist. If you're watching video, you can see I've got their company logo on my shirt. They are a digital source for practices, build websites, and help them market their practices. And so let's find out what's going on with them. Michael, Laura, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
So let's talk about obviously you're working in the dental business. Not everybody listening to the podcast is a dentist, but a lot of the people I talk to are in the dental industry. So give us the rundown on this business. And first of all, it started 12 years ago. Is that
10? Just about 11, actually. Next month it'll be 11.
Oh, okay.
Ago.
Yeah. So what do you do? What's the detail of it?
Yeah. So we are a full service marketing agency for dentists, and we help them generate new patients so that they can increase the revenue in their practice.
And how many clients are you servicing nationwide now?
Yeah, I think we are in 49 states, and we have about 800 clients nationally.
So what's the state you don't like?
I think is it Idaho? I think we're not in Idaho.
It's a pretty sparse environment. Although I'm about to pick up
Idaho,
a client in Coeur d'Alene right now.
There you go.
But yeah, so and I've actually been to 47 of the states.
That's impressive.
I haven't been to the Dakotas or Alaska yet, and so I've never seen Mount Rushmore, which would be about the only reason to go to the Dakotas, I think.
May or may not be true.
Or the pipeline that comes through there. So when you started this, did you have a sense of where it was going to go, or what was the inception when you said, all right, well, let's do this? What brought this on?
Yeah. Do you want me to take this part?
Yes.
Yeah. So Wonderist really started with a friend who was a dentist, and I had been working in marketing in LA, and I had been working at Deutsch, which is one of the big agencies there, and had been doing stuff for their local initiatives. So Fortune 500 clients on their local client level. So I was working for Saturn Automotive at the time that this all came to be, and then Sony Pictures Entertainment on their local executions. And so I had a very acute understanding of how all the very local markets across the US worked. And he came to me and he said, hey, listen, I think you do this for big clients. Can you do it for small ones like me, like a dentist? And I was like, I don't know. Let me give it a shot. I think so. And he's an excellent clinician and an excellent businessman, and is one of our very good friends. And so we kind of started working together on things and making the phone ring. And really what I was at that point was an account manager, and I would source out somebody to build the website. I would source out somebody to do the SEO. I'd source out somebody to do the direct mail and then the TV. And then I would quarterback the whole thing because there was pieces of that I didn't know how to do. And so that went on for maybe a couple of years, 2 years. And I had a handful of clients and was living in Japan. And then life event, divorce, brought me back to the States. And I went home for a little while to just kind of recollect myself. And I happened to be out at a fancy restaurant right before Christmas. And there was a handsome man who I thought might be a dentist sitting at the table behind me. And I'm telling the G-rated version. Michael can decide if he wants to tell the X-rated version. We kind of met eyes, and I passed him a business card, and he texted me, and that man was Michael. And so we kind of got to talking, and we found out, and I think the point of convergence for both of us is we're both adopted, and that really set the fire light and kind of having a lot to talk about. And so he was like, oh, what do you do? And I was like, oh, I have this thing. I just got back from Japan. I got a couple clients. And he was like, I think I think you're really onto something. I work in healthcare and I can kind of do all the things that you don't know how to do. And maybe there's something here that we could do together. And so we kind of joined forces immediately within a week of knowing each other. I think we both kind of realized we were going to be married
all right.
at some
So
point.
is joined forces a euphemism here?
I mean, wink, nod.
I think that was a week and a half. No,
so she put up a real fight there. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, for me, it was interesting because I have a little bit of a different perspective. I was just so impressed when I met Laura with what she'd discovered. And I was coming from this sort of incubator model. I was working on startups for a Fortune 500 company. We're trying to build these companies and scale them to the country. And one of the things that's drummed into your head is niche down, find small verticals. And, in my young life, I remember understanding that concept, but I always remember meeting people and I say, what do you do? And they'd say, oh, I build this particular widget for military tanks and I have a military contract. And I'm like, how did you niche down that far? But, $50 million later, there you are. And I think if you sat me in a room for 10 years, I wouldn't think of, hey, dentists really need marketing. But as Laura described the problems that, the handful of clients she had were going through, I'm like, wow, this is a really unique group of businesses in that dentists go through all this training, all this school, and they become technically very proficient. They have this amazing skill that people need. And as through all that training, they get very little support on how to run a business, what goes into marketing, how to manage a team, how to be a leader. And so there's this deep need that a lot of dentists have for additional support. And so, we've spent the last 10 plus years now growing a team that is uniquely situated to support those dentists. And I think about, many conversations we've had with you and this idea of boldness. There have had to be so many moments, so many iterations of our company. I think about the company when it's just Laura and I, and I'll say, yeah, great idea. Meet someone you're attracted to who's getting out of a marriage. Say, hey, why don't we start dating across country? She was in LA, I was in Wisconsin. And why don't we start a business together? You can imagine our family and our friends were not giving us lots of positive affirmation at that point. There was some boldness to say, we think we know what we're doing here. I will say there is one day, you asked, was that a week or on our third day together, Laura looked at me and she said, you're going to marry me. I don't think it was a question. She was telling me what I was going to do. And I'm
telling you what you were already thinking.
At my core, I'm a people pleaser. So here I am 10 years later.
Okay, I guess I am. Yes.
Yeah. And so it kind of just started out of the kitchen. And some of our early, there's just 1,000,001 stories that Michael and I have about the mistakes we've made or the bold and bizarre situations we've found ourselves in. One of my favorites was in the early days. We didn't have an office. It was just us. And we had just moved to San Diego and we were trying to hire. And so we would tell people to meet us at a coffee shop for the interview. And we'd tell them, well, occasionally you need to work in our condo, when we need that. And they would be like, okay, great. And then we'd call them and we'd make them the offer. We'd say, and by the way, you need to work out of our condo. And so every day from 9 to 5, we would have, 4 or 5 people in our house. And our guest bedroom was our office space, and that's where we'd go to have hard conversations.
No, that was a conference room. The living room was kind of the workspace. The guest room was the conference room. If you had to have a hard conversation with someone, you'd bring them up to the guest bedroom.
There was no bed in there, presumably.
It's a pull-out bed, so
okay.
It's just like what we did in the early days. It never occurred to us to have an office. And I'll tell you the thing that did, the day that it did, my biological family was in town, and they were sleeping in the guest room on the pull-out couch, and we were working, having a normal work day. And my biological dad walked out in his boxer shorts to get a glass of water and forgot that there was going to be 5 people there. He quickly grabbed me by the nape of the neck and was like, it's time for you to get an office. And Michael and I were like, oh, what a great idea. It's time for you to
get some pants,
Yeah. And so a week later we had an office. So that was really the pinnacle moment there for us. But that was truly, humble beginnings, truly humble beginnings.
Yep.
But I think that, when we started 1-800-DENTIST, we were in 200 square feet, for 2 years.
Yeah.
And that was where we amalgamated the business and annealed it out of listening to every sales call and all of the incoming calls and hearing what everybody was saying all the time. And my partner and I would leave, because the only time we could talk is at lunch. Basically, we would leave the office and have lunch every day and talk about the business. And there was nothing to do. The beauty of the business, and this is pretty much true for you guys too. There isn't a lot to do on the weekends. You can find stuff to do, but in terms of finding a dentist to talk to or anything like that, it ends. Sometime in Friday afternoon. So we would have the weekends to sort of recharge and just relax. But it was, the challenge I see with a lot of these people who started virtual businesses now is they think they can do everything remotely, and have all the teams never coming together. And I think you don't learn what is working and not working, and what the marketplace really wants without that concentrated time. So I recommend people, like you did, like you had them boxed together to really see everything that was happening. And but I love the fact that that there were some bold bungles along the way. I mean, but I mean, it does take boldness to say we're going to go against what people are recommending, because everybody told me 800 dentists wasn't going to work. The guy who ran my ad agency, the guy, I quit the job to run 800 dentists, and he said that will never work. And then I think for the next 30 years, he saw commercials on TV, and he was probably by the end of it, he was probably convinced. But so, what was the biggest challenge that you hit early on?
Yeah, I think for me, it's one of the things that you're pushing towards, which is formation of company culture, right? At the end of the day, one thing I think a lot of people take for granted when they get hired by a company, they walk in and whether or not you know it, there is a culture there, right? The culture could be no culture, but that's still a culture at the end of the day. And it's easy to take that stuff for granted. And when you're just starting out, there's one person, there's two people, each person that gets added there, it's a big new variable in the culture. And there was a point, we were probably, 2 to 3 years into Laura and I doing it. And I would say it was a potential failure point. We had 5 people on the team. We did have our office. So, we felt like we'd made it. And if for anyone that wants to check, we literally wrote a press release when we got like 300 square feet of space. And then we grew a little more. We actually opened a door and got another little closet, another like 200 square feet of space. And we wrote another press release. So yeah, like you said, a little less to do back then, and yet so much to do. And I think that, I just remember a period of time where it felt like the wheels were coming off, and it was culture. It was people that were unhappy. It was mistakes we made in our young leadership, our lack of knowing how to work with people. And so, there was this point in time, one of the gentlemen is still with us. He's our longest tenured team member. Another one is still a dear friend of ours. We had this point when a team member left us. I remember there was kind of like a letter that was like a declaration of how unjust things were going. And we felt really down. I think we had a couple clients that were pissed off. It just felt like nothing was going our way. And about $30 of rum and $20 of decorations from Party City later, we had our first, what we'll call, social event. And it wasn't our idea. It was our team. These two guys get all the credit. They kind of just said, hey, we're all feeling this. Let's do something fun.
Let's drown our sorrows in rum.
And it just, I think for us as leaders, we felt a little seen. It was great to feel that there were people that saw what we were trying to do and they wanted to be part of it. And it just blew the lid off something that has become the hallmark of Wonderist. If anyone doesn't know about Wonderist, whether or not you're in dentistry or not, look us up on social media, look us up on Instagram. I love to encourage people to say, what makes you different when it comes to your business? And for us, it's our team, it's our culture, and we wear it on our sleeve. You have to follow us for about 1 week to see the difference I'm always amazed at marketing agencies that, they talk about all the great stuff they do. And then you go and say, well, who's doing it? And you go on their website, you look on their social, there's these stock images of, like the Matrix and somebody's, some humanoid face coming through the Matrix, saying, I can optimize your SEO. That's not what it comes. It's not the smartest people in the room. It's the people with the best process, the people with the best team that end up really making a difference. And that's what we've hung our hat on. So if I could go back in time and I could be in that room, we were at a point where we thought about quitting. We were like, this isn't fun. We're bickering. One of the other big challenges for us, it's not easy to build a business and work together and then go home together. I'll tell you, I've had moments where I've tried to give Laura, professional feedback. And I'm sure to this day, it's still how I said it, but it has not landed well. And so, there's really hard moments when you're having to juggle everything and the culture isn't there to pull you up and lift you up.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of people who talk a culture game now, but they, and I actually heard this, at the last DSO event I was at, and there were a lot of guys talking about culture. And if you ask the rank and file who work for most of those DSOs, they would go, that doesn't mean anything to us. The difference I know is there's a couple of them that are but it is so conscious. It is so deliberate and systematized that it is nurtured on a regular basis. It's just, I'll never forget meeting Tony Shea, who was running Zappos, and toured the place. And he had the core values right up, and everybody knew him. It wasn't all talk; it was all action. They lived by it, and we adopted that ourselves. We actually put the employees together and said, we are going to together write our core values, what we will and won't do for money, what this place is going to be about, and how we are going to treat each other. And they became so powerful because we'd be in a meeting and somebody would say, this doesn't sound like, doing more with less. And the meeting would just stop, and it would be like, all right, well, the hell with that idea.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And we could move on. It became, the lexicon of how we problem solved and made decisions. But it has to be so deliberate because, as you say, a culture will form itself.
Yes,
and
it will.
You won't be happy with it because it's a lot of times it's the dominant person creating it is not how you would be creating it, the dominant employee. Was there a tipping point in the business where you said, we're getting big and it's becoming unmanageable as this size, and you had to figure out what to do then? Because there's always tiers of growth that are shifts as well. Did you experience that, or was it sort of a somewhat steady climb?
I think there's certainly been seasons, but on the whole, we've grown pretty considerably, pretty quickly each and every year. But I think, to your point, one of the big things that I think we instituted, which is a huge piece for our culture, but also for our business, is something that we call camp. And so every quarter, the whole operations at Wonderist shut down. And we get the whole team together and we talk about the state of the business. We talk about culture. We talk about our values. We usually have some sort of TED Talk style representation by our department heads. We may do an exercise in process. We did something with assembling peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in an assembly line to make a point about process. And so, it's always a really fun day for Michael and I, and it's a great way for us to reflect individually as business owners, but also as a team. And in those early weeks and months of when we started doing camp, Michael and I shouldered the burden of the 100-page deck that was the whole day presentation to put it together. And I think one of the things that just routinely astounds us is Michael and I maybe touched a handful of pages of that deck every quarter now, and that deck has gone from 50 pages to 100 pages to 250 pages, and that sounds like a lot, but we roll through it really fast, and we probably have 10 to 15 participants on stage a day, and it's just tremendous to see what everybody has built. I mean,
Yeah.
it is just a absolute masterpiece in the incredible team that we have and the quality of the work that they do and their just level of caring for each other and for their clients. Camp is truly a beautiful reflection of the culture that we've built, and I think is kind of one of the big things that let us leap from the little leagues to the big leagues.
Yeah, I agree completely. I love your idea of intentional culture, right? And I think one thing we realized early on was that, you know, we unintentionally created a pretty good culture, and it was a very social culture. You go out after work, find a new brewery, have a couple drinks. There's a lot of bonding that happened there, and a lot of friendships that were created. I think we realized that happy hour was not a culture. That wasn't enough. And camp, I think, really became one of the things that codified who we were. We intentionally, like Laura said, talked about our values. Every camp, we still do. Anyone that says they don't know what we stand for is not paying attention. And we've embraced radical transparency. Everyone here knows our financial numbers, our performance, our goals. They're clearly communicated. And what I like about saying that with respect to culture is, I remember there's this great article that studied, cultures across companies, and something came out of, talking to team members at Google, and they said, it's not the biggest thing we want is to feel trust. We want to feel there's a culture of trust. That's the most important thing. Like, it's not about having a ping pong table. It's trusting that if you were to choose to play ping pong in the middle of the day, you wouldn't be judged for it. That's what having a ping pong table is about. And I've always hung on to that. It's, do people really believe the things you're saying? Are you living up to your culture? I love that you brought up Tony Hsieh. What a profound impact that guy's had on generations. So I came from the Milwaukee tech startup scene. That's kind of where I cut my teeth. And, there's an individual in that community that had a really close relationship with Tony. So he was more accessible. He came and spoke. I remember listening to him, and I remember he blew my mind. He put his email up on the screen, said, if you guys have any questions, just email me. And this was a room of like 300 people. I emailed him. He got back to me. And I remember spending like $20 to get their culture book. I think they called it the culture book. It was like basically every year they released a yearbook of what they did. And I just remember being like, this guy's doing stuff that nobody is doing. It's unbelievable. And I felt the impact that he's had in our company. I've talked to so many people that his name bubbles up, and what a tragedy that he's gone. But in so many ways lives on in I think,
modern day business,
massively changing the cultural landscape of American business.
Yeah, and the belief in that intentional culture, that belief in how you execute it. And I remember I was invited to tour his place. Somebody said, you got to go do it, because they would do tours of the place for anybody who wanted to tour. And then somebody introduced me to him, one of his team members, who was the tour guide, they had tour guides, literal tour guides.
That's right.
Amazing. And I met Tony, and he said, let's go to lunch. And so we went to lunch. We sit down. The first thing he says to me is, so how can I help you?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a billionaire, basically, who's saying this to me. And I just thought, wow, he's coming from this place of just open generosity. He certainly influenced me. I have a picture from the tour where I have the crown on my head, and they took Polaroids of everybody who ever came in on tour and stuff. But the other thing that you talked about that's a boldness move, and a lot of people don't know that's what it is, but it takes boldness to truly delegate, to not just call it delegating, and then meanwhile you're puppet mastering and micromanaging behind the scenes. It's like delegating the culture. Like you're talking about your camp day, it's all delegated now. They've taken ownership of that. And it's a business doesn't grow if you're not bold enough to say, I am going to let somebody else take full responsibility for this.
Yeah, one of the cool things that we've done for so we've got about 60 people that we get the pleasure of working with. And, probably when we were a team of about 30, we made the decision to hire someone who is our office and culture manager. And, she deserves an immense amount of credit. In fact, every time we talk, I'm like, Sarah, you should write a book.
She should
write a book about what we're doing. And then, like, she ushered us through the pandemic. She's, grown our culture from a smaller team to a bigger team. And there's just so many nuances to it that have been helpful. But what I wanted to point out is, I think if you run a business based on a spreadsheet, there's very few businesses that have 30 people that are going to say, let's hire someone and pay them a lot of money to just manage our culture. It sounds crazy. And I want to connect this to a story. I remember one time there was a client that was frustrated with us. And I think I was on a call with her. Maybe I got an email. And she said, I follow you on social media. And I see you guys just seem to be throwing a party all the time. You're taking your team on a boat ride. You're having a good time at a happy hour, and it really annoys me. You're throwing it in my face. And I remember being blown away by that. And I talked to her about it a little bit. And I said, you got to think about it from our perspective. I'll break some news here. Marketing agency world is notorious for turnover. You've got a lot of young people coming in. You've got a lot of agencies that don't pay a lot. You've got, people that expect the world, work till 8 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, don't get compensated for the amount of effort. That's the real world of marketing agencies. And what we've always wanted to do selfishly is say, I want stability. It's tough to replace someone. I'm not saying that we're this altruistic, we just want a nice culture because we want to be kind. We selfishly want a nice culture so people are happy in their jobs and they stay here. And that's great for clients. That's how you can have predictability in your campaigns, not have someone leave out the back door and have a big gap that's just sitting there and all of a sudden the wheels come off the process. So for me, intentional culture has been incredibly selfish in a way because we want people to stay with us. We want stability in our company. And, I think for anyone listening to this, my call would be that sometimes doing something that doesn't make sense on your spreadsheet, like spending money for someone to own your culture, spending more money than you did last year on a Christmas party, a holiday party, a happy hour, a boat cruise for your team, all this stuff that it's an expense. It's a negative. It's a red. What can you gain from that? And we've found that we've grown immensely by investing in that part of our business. And I would encourage people to do it much sooner than you think. Get uncomfortable with it.
Yeah, it's what I call HROI. It's a hidden ROI.
Yes.
There you go.
Love that.
That's great.
But it's, and let's bring it down to our industry in particularly, that dentists when dealing with vendors, they hate the fact that it's a different customer service person every time. I mean, we had, a whole customer service department and they owned their 100 dentists. The dentist knew that he was emailing Rob or calling Rob and going to get Rob, and Rob had been there 15 years. Yep. And economically, there is a true ROI that's not so hidden, which is it is really expensive to find and train somebody new. Yep. The hidden expense is the damage it does when it is a new person with that dentist client in particular.
Big time.
Yep.
And on the other side, the dentist has to realize I want to see the same hygienist every time.
Yes.
I don't want a new hygienist every time I go. So it's worth the effort to keep somebody and to be consistent with who's interacting. I mean, I tell people this all the time because one of the things we did culturally was we had monthly, we had birthday day, and it was birthday and anniversary day. So we read all of the birthdays. We read who had been there 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 15, whatever it was. And we had something, we had after 5 years, we had a check for them. And so we would read all of those things. And again, it was a delegating thing. What happened is, instead of me talking about it, their manager would talk about the person who had hit 10 years and expound about the value that they brought and how much they grew in the business. And I ran 800 dentists for 28 years. And my last month there, we celebrated 3 25-year employees.
That's amazing.
In the same month. And that was like, these people gave me their entire adult lives. You want to talk about consistency. From a management level, they were all, one of them was actually just a customer service person. She had never moved beyond it. But imagine the trust that she had built with clients. And that's the other thing that happens. That's what happens when you delegate, is you build trust. And I'm pontificating here, but people who micromanage are communicating something very clear. I don't trust you. And if you don't feel trusted as an employee, then you don't feel engaged to the company. You don't feel connected to the company. But when you do feel trusted, you do feel connected. You're just like, well, I'm not going to leave here for money. I'm not going to leave here for, because somebody said, oh, I got a better position for you. It's going to be more interesting here or whatever. We actually had to let people go because they had been there too long. Like, they needed to move on in their lives, and they would,
Yep.
and they would call us and say, thank God you released me, because it was too comfortable to stay. And they said, but I needed to be kicked out and into the wild world and get to the next stage of my life. But anyway,
I think
that's
what does Dr. Mark Costas calls that freeing people's futures.
Freeing the future, yeah.
I was just talking to Mark, actually. That's so interesting. So on a personal note, and very much in the Superbold concept, one of the things that I talk about is not stacking regrets. The point of being bold is because most people are hesitating or not fixing something or missing opportunities or not apologizing for something. And they're missing these times when they should step up, when they should speak up, when they should reach out. And this is something, Michael, that you've confessed that you wrestle with, that you are tormented by regrets, I think would be a simple way of putting it.
I think for my entire adult life, I've heard people take the stage, or I've been in conversations where people will say, I don't regret anything. Or certainly given strong calls that, you shouldn't regret things. And I will confess that is not me. And for me, it's when I'm driving down the street. My favorite one, and I don't know if anyone else has this, and it's not a joke. You see someone that you don't recognize and they're waving to you. And you don't trust it at first, but they're waving really enthusiastically, and you finally wave back. I'm not going to leave them hanging. And then you realize it's not you. That stuff, there's a little tattoo that gets etched somewhere in my core, and it comes back up. Now, those are the easy ones. Do I lose sleep over that? No. But do I think about it from time to time? Yes. There are many other things that I would go back, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of things I would do differently. People I've heard, things I've said that I would say differently. And I think one of my strengths, one of my drivers is I'm a tinkerer. When it comes to the business in front of me, whether it's a relationship, whether it's creative endeavor, whether it's business, I just pick things apart and put them back together 100 different ways to try to figure out what I want to do. And I think, unfortunately, that lens turns and is retrospective as well. I pick things apart that happen. I say, hey, how could I have done that differently? Why did I do it that way? And so, it's something that I struggle with. I realize that, in our business, we don't spend a lot of time being satisfied with what we've accomplished. We turn our attention quickly to the next broken piece. And I think that engine is both a powerful engine and one that can have a negative impact as well. So I certainly do struggle with it.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think that I don't have any regrets is bullshit. Yeah, when somebody says that, I'm not buying it. It's like it's a pitch idea, but it's not a reality, or you're delusional or an incredible narcissist. And I think people who say that are not necessarily that, but it's all part of their, like, you got to be, going forward all the time. I think you have to mine, and I talk about it in Superbold, you have to mine your regrets. So you do something differently. Yes. You step up, you speak up, you say something at a eulogy, you call that, you give that person feedback when they need it rather than after they quit or what, and so, or after you have to fire them. All of those things that it's information. Don't ignore those things. Just say, indulge the pain and say, yeah, I'm not going that way again. I stacked so many regrets that I said, I have to fix this. I have to speak up, even though it's incredibly uncomfortable. So now my message is, learn to enjoy the discomfort
Yes.
of stretching yourself. Because people do it, they do it in the gym. That's the whole workout is uncomfortable. So like, transfer it to the rest of your life. Be willing to be uncomfortable and actually go like, this is where something's happening. So
Becoming a willing participant in getting better is truly a freeing thing to do for yourself. I feel like you can sit and be on autopilot in your life, and then the minute that you're like, oh, I can get better and it's not that hard, I just have to take a really raw look at myself, like that's really when the fun stuff starts, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I love doing 360s with my business, because I would find out stuff about myself that I had no idea about. I was a messenger killer. I found out.
We have three kids at home. It's such a fun chapter of our life. And one thing I'm always struck by is that they're in such a season of learning and growing and not being able to do things. I mean, you think about it, like our daughter, from one week to the next, she literally couldn't turn the light switch on because she was too short. But she's like, I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep trying. She got it one day. She's like, I turned the light switch on. It's amazing. And it's so sad that I think as adults, as the school system kicks us out, we kind of say, great, did that. And a lot of times we fall too quickly into this mindset of, I'm going to stick with what I know. I'm going to stick with what's comfortable. And I find that in my life. I certainly all too often do that. And kids for me are such a good reminder. You just see how comfortable they are being uncomfortable, how comfortable they are with failure. And then all of a sudden their growth happens. And I think that for me, that's been a big lesson in our last couple of years, to just, as you said, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Those have been some of my favorite moments when I look back, and I'm so glad I sat next to that person that, was really going through something hard, and I asked about it.
Yep.
And we had a conversation about it, and I can tell everybody else was avoiding it. Nobody else wanted to bring it up, acknowledge it. And boy, the relationship we have today, or the takeaway that I got from that conversation, so glad I sat down and did that.
Yeah. And it is very much about, connecting with people. I find that everybody is interesting. And I didn't believe that 30 years ago. I had a whole group of people that I thought weren't going to be interesting, but that was just my own fear that I wouldn't be accepted. So the great safety was in just, they're not worthy of knowing me. But I have found just that the other amazing thing that's happened, if you talk to almost anybody long enough, you find that you both know the same person. Somewhere. It's like, oh yeah, I know that guy from when I was in New Zealand, we hung out together. It's like, what? But I mean, it's about being able to meet people, but also, what you said, growth-minded people are so important to surround yourself with, because there's a whole bunch of people who at 22 said, I am just going to stick to what I know and what I'm comfortable with. And they stop. And it happens. You see it happen in marriages where one person grows and the other one has decided to never grow again. And it's on the rocks. It's headed for disaster.
Laura keeps yanking me with her. I'm like, let's pump the brakes on growth. She's like, no, a little bit further. But I did want to say, we do have to thank you, Fred. You were bringing up this idea of, you talk to anyone long enough and someone, well, you're that person for us in dentistry, right? It's great. We talk to someone long enough and we're like, well, do you know Fred Joyle? And everyone's like, yeah, I know Fred Joyle. So it's you're the common thread for most of our conversations.
That's an easy move right there. So, yeah. But yeah, and I do find that, in running Social Smiles now, I run into more people who've read my books that I have never met. And it's like, oh, I got both your books. It's like, really? How come we've never, but it's because there's thousands of them out
Yeah.
there.
It's amazing.
But so and I don't want to get too much. It's such a long story. I don't want to get into Francie, your daughter, but you have had an incredible struggle and challenge with your most recent child, and yet she continues to thrive. So you've had to make some bold personal decisions as soon as you got the news. And so I admire you very much for that, because you came from the most loving place possible for Francie and for each other. And so if you want to talk a little bit about that, feel free.
We're happy to. I think, I was 30 weeks pregnant with our third, Francie, and I'll try and keep this as concise as I can. But we went to a routine ultrasound that you get when you're over the age of 35 having a baby here. And
that's officially called a geriatric pregnancy, just in case anyone's wondering.
Just so everyone knows,
nice.
I look 25. And so we very quickly, upon getting in that room, realized that the technician saw something she did not like. She had a background in fetal cardiology, and so she saw something, raised a red flag. It just so happened that a fetal cardiologist was in the perinatal lab. And fast forward to 48 hours later, we had a diagnosis of dilated cardiomyopathy with 2 VSDs, or a VSD and an ASD, so 2 holes in the heart. And they had prepped us for a stillbirth. And so there was 10 weeks to go. I was getting monitored nearly daily. Francie was getting monitored in utero nearly daily. And it knocked our world off its axis. We have a great life. We have very little resistance, and we're very comfortable. And, this diagnosis really put us back on our heels. We didn't know what to expect, and it just sent both of us spinning. And I think, we're very lucky to have a stable marriage, to have a stable family, to have a stable career and company and job. And stable support surrounding us. And we were able to navigate the remaining 10 weeks. Francie stayed stable in utero, which nobody was expecting. They immediately launched us into heart transplant conversations, meeting with surgeons, meeting with pediatric cardiologists. We basically had a full-time job for nearly 10 weeks of learning about heart dysfunction. And they said, if she makes it to birth, you'll probably only have a few minutes with her, and if that. And she had an amazing labor. It was quick and amazing, and our team was just phenomenal that was with us. And when she came out, she had a knot in her cord, in addition to all her heart dysfunction, which heart dysfunction in itself, to the level she has it, is 1 in a few million. To also have what's called a true knot in your umbilical cord is nearly always a fetal demise situation. So Francie is a fighter, and she had a tremendous delivery. And we had negotiated 1 minute. That was what we negotiated at the hospital, 1 minute of time of us holding her before she would have to get whisked away and probably put on life support or hang out in the hospital until we could find her a heart. Well, it turned out that she was okay for the moment, and we found ourselves an hour later in a room that was with nobody in it. You could have erected bleachers at my delivery. And from there, she spent 5 days in the NICU, and we were expecting to spend 7-8 months on a transplant list. Suffice to say, they were like, after 5 days, well, you guys can go home now. And we were like, wait, what? We didn't have anything. We didn't have diapers. We didn't have clothes. We had absolutely nothing. So our family scurried to get a makeshift nursery set up in our room. And Francie's been home with us pretty much since, aside from a small stint in the CTICU. And she's stable today, but we're looking down the pipeline of likely open heart surgery and transplant here in the next few years. And it's just been a whirlwind. It's been a life-shifting, life-altering, uncomfortable and difficult circumstance. But honestly, it's also been very sweet and awakening and alive, and honestly, in a very weird way, a pleasure to be able to look around our life and see who's giving the gift of time and effort and love to our family right now. And sorry, I'm getting choked up. I'm kind of getting a little long-winded. You can jump in here if you want to cut me off.
I'm not going to save you.
And so
we're embracing being uncomfortable, right? This is the
we've very boldly taken a step back from our business in a very large capacity, probably only working a couple days a week. And our team has risen to the occasion on our behalf. And they're just tremendous human beings who have lent incredible support the last few months. And we don't know what lies ahead. I think that's the most difficult part. You kind of, after a little while, hopefully settle into a new normal, but we don't know. And so we have to remain open and flexible and kind of keep stepping forward day by day in the face of uncertainty. There is a shot that Francie may only be with us a short time, and we have to be okay with that. And so it's not a easy thing to digest on a daily basis, but finding the grace in all of that, finding the peace in all of that has been a welcome challenge.
Yeah, I, what I would add is so much of, I think, what we've talked about today has created the foundation for our experience. I loved your metaphor of the gym. We talk about that all the time with business. It's you're going to the gym, you're building muscle, you're growing as a person. And I think that one of the great things about our business has been that, over the many years, we've had lots of opportunities to do things the wrong way, to be in a stressful situation and approach it the wrong way, to not know how to work with a team the right way. And, when I look at the experience we've had here in the last, 3 or 4 months, it's been made so much better by the fact that we got to be on the treadmill for the many years that we have. And it's really validated just the amazing team that we've built. I mean, these people truly, you can tell the team cares. The day we found out about Francie, we called our parents, and it was heartbreaking. We had to tell them that, at that point they said she's unlikely to live. And then we looked at each other and we said, listen, we're telling our family day. We drove into work right after that. It was the next thing we did. And we pulled the whole team together and we sat there and we told them what was going on. And since that day, people have showed up big time for us. They've bought us peace and grace and space. And it's been, feel very grateful that we've gone on the journey we have to now be in a place to really focus on Francie. And I love bold is the word that kind of brings us together on this podcast. And I think about Francie and it's so easy to say, oh gosh, she's the boldest one of all of us, right? Because it sounds good, but she's a baby. She's just doing what she knows how to do. I think she's inspired so much boldness in the rest of us. And that's the thing I connect to. And it really puts life in stark relief when you sit down. One day I sat down, we were in the CTICU for a period of time because she wasn't growing. And I slept with her every night. And I found myself at the Ronald McDonald House eating dinner. And that's something I never thought I'd say. I'm at the Ronald McDonald House eating dinner because our newborn is at the CTICU. And there's just, there's things that you would never choose to do that you kind of boldly look in the face and say, okay, our daughter might not live to be 2 years old. How do we feel about that? What are we grateful for? We might be going back to the CTICU for open heart surgery. How do we feel about that? What are we grateful for? And I think that the other side of this for me has been gratitude. I always come back to, we were begging for 1 minute of time with her and we're going on 2 months. Amazing. She's a cute kid and she's changed our life. So it's been a crazy chapter and we've learned a lot. And we're very grateful for the life that we've been able to build through the gym that we've not always willingly subscribed to beforehand, but certainly the one that has built us up.
Yeah, I think Michael and I have gained a tremendous amount of stamina and a tremendous amount of resilience through owning a business. And you learn to deal with taking punches time after time after time after time after time because it's unrelenting. And then it's just, how do you deal with it? And I think we've been put into shape to take this challenge and to take Francie up the mountain with us. And so it's been a true gift to have this business, have this team, and have it teach us the lessons it's taught us so that we can apply it to the rest of our life.
Yeah, I think the true test of your company is how they were given a chance to step up and, just relished it, just seized it. And you got to be so proud of those people. And proud of yourselves for building the company. But the pride really goes to these people want to be this. And a company is so much more than a P&L.
Yep.
If you really put your heart into it, and I think that's what you've done is your company is a representation of who you really are, and it's attracted those people, and those are powerful lessons. But I mean, Francie has reverberated through your community and beyond. I mean, I tell her story and your story over and over again, and people are, I mean, they're so inspired by that, because I remember the conversation when you told me, and you just said, we're gonna love her as long as she's inside of me, and for however many seconds we have her. That was your choice, and she has proven to be way more determined than you to like, I am going to thrive in the face of all medical impossibilities. I mean, she needs to buy lottery tickets as soon as she's old enough, because and so I so appreciate this time, and I hope people are listening to this and being inspired, and also coming away with the true heart of boldness, which is, how do you dare to be a better person, to face adversity, to be resilient, and to be generous, and to be grateful. And so you guys are a treasure to me. You're never getting rid of me. So
I feel the same.
So thank you for this time, and I look forward to meeting Francie in person as soon as I can get down there. So thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Always good to chat.
And everyone else, keep on becoming bolder.